When I talk about rethinking celebration, I'm talking about stepping back from the noise long enough to hear your own heartbeat. There was a time in my life when a birthday felt like a performance. Lights on, people watching, everyone expecting you to smile, to laugh, to be on. But sometimes you don't need applause, you need awareness. You start realizing that celebration isn't about balloons or candles, it's about alignment. It's about asking yourself, am I living a life worth celebrating, or am I just following a tradition because that's what everybody else does? When you rethink celebration, you stop chasing validation and start chasing truth. You stop measuring your worth by who shows up with cake and start measuring it by what you've survived, what you've learned, and who you're becoming. And the moment you shift that perspective, the birthday stops being a ritual on a calendar and becomes a mirror, showing you exactly where you stand and where you still need to go. There's a strange kind of honesty that only silence can deliver. When you don't make an announcement, when you don't drop hints, when you don't remind the world that it's your day, the room suddenly gets very real. You begin to notice who remembers you without being told, who checks in without being prompted, who values you without the spotlight. I learned this the hard way. One year I stayed quiet on purpose and the silence exposed the truth like nothing else ever had. The people I expected to show up disappeared, and the ones I never imagined cared were the first to knock on my door. That's the power of stepping back. It strips away the performance and leaves you with the pure, unpolished reality of your relationships. In that quiet, you see who's clapping for you because they love you and who's clapping because everyone else is. Silence doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't bend. It reveals exactly who stands with you when there's nothing in it for them. And once you've seen that truth, you don't ever look at birthdays or people the same way again. Time is the only currency you can't earn back, and yet we spend it like it grows on trees. Every year we pour hours into planning, posting, entertaining, trying to live up to an expectation that doesn't even belong to us. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, we forget that our time is supposed to serve our growth, not our guest list. When you choose to skip a birthday, you're not rejecting the tradition. You're reclaiming ownership over your hours, your energy, your emotional space. You're saying investing in something bigger than candles and cake. And there was a moment in my life when I realized that I'd been giving more time to celebration than to direction, more time to being seen than to becoming strong. And that's when it hit me. Tradition can be beautiful, but it can also become a trap, something you follow simply because you've always followed it. When you step away from that cycle and put your time into reflection, healing, planning, dreaming, you start building a future instead of repeating a ritual. You learn that meaningful progress happens in the hours nobody else witnesses. And the moment you make that shift, choosing purpose over performance, you begin to treat your time like the treasure it is, guarding it, shaping it, and giving it only where it truly matters. There's a certain kind of growth that doesn't happen in crowds and parties or in rooms filled with noise. It happens in the quiet corners of your life, the places where only your thoughts and your truth exist. When you step away from the birthday hype, when you sit in a room with nothing but your own breath and your own questions, something powerful begins to unfold. You start meeting the version of yourself you've been too distracted to notice. The version that's been whispering instead of shouting. The version that's been waiting for you to slow down long enough to listen. In that silence, you confront things you've been running from, your fears, your doubts, your dreams you buried because life got too busy. You begin to sharpen your spirit the way a blade meets the stone, slow, steady, intentional. That's where character is forged. That's where clarity is born. You learn what truly matters to you, what drains you, what fuels you, who lifts you, and who quietly breaks you. And with every moment of stillness, you become stronger, clearer, more grounded. Growth in the quiet isn't loud or glamorous. It's deep. It's the kind of transformation people won't understand until they see the new strength in your eyes. When you step back from the world, even for one birthday, you return carrying something the world cannot give you. Yourself, sharpened, centered, and ready for the next chapter. Purpose is a fire that burns deeper than any tradition, deeper than any date circled on a calendar. When you choose purpose over ritual, you're making a decision to stop living life on autopilot. You're refusing to celebrate out of habit and choosing instead to celebrate out of meaning. There comes a moment when you look at your life and ask, is this tradition helping me rise or is it just keeping me busy? And that question alone can shift everything. When you skip a birthday, you're not rejecting the world. You're choosing a moment to realign with the reason you're here. You're giving yourself the space to ask the bigger questions. What am I fighting for? What am I building? What kind of legacy do I want my days to echo with? Purpose isn't loud, it isn't decorated, and it doesn't need candles to shine. It needs intention. It needs honesty. It needs a heart willing to walk a little differently from the crowd. There's a power in saying, I'll celebrate when I've grown, not just because the calendar tells me to. Imagine the strength of stepping away for a day, not to hide, but to focus. To choose vision over noise, destiny over routine, becoming over performing. That's when your life stops being a cycle and becomes a mission. And when you walk back into the world after that pause, with purpose ignited in your chest, people will see it. They'll feel it. Because a person guided by purpose doesn't just live their years, they define them.